Yeah, Colby, I can't find a way to change the name on here. Can you do it from here?
Let me see if I can do it.
Well, I can do it real quick.
You can do it. All right.
I had to do that other thing first. Change.
I always forget when I just click on the agenda on the, it comes right to it, but doesn't give me an opening to change the name.
How many
Okay,
aliases,
you're
how many
now
aliases
Ren
do you have, Ren?
Pardon me?
I said, how many aliases do you have? All right.
Well, Joanne Saliba is not quite an alias. It's my other half, so.
I know. All right. Very good.
That's your host, right? You see it?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, great. You can take it away. We are recording on Zoom and it's streaming live on YouTube.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Colby. So my name is Tess Taylor. I'm the chair of the Governmental Affairs Committee of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council. Welcome, everybody. I call this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. I'll start with taking roll. So Catherine Hatton.
Here.
Ren Blight.
Here.
Sean Besharati.
Here.
Kelly Cole. Do we see her among the attendees? I don't believe so. So Kelly's absent and I, Tess Taylor, am here. So we have achieved quorum. Congratulations. I will mention to members of the public, of which we have 5 currently here in attendance, that if you have a comment, you can raise your hand using the Zoom function, or if you're calling in by phone, you can dial in or you can comment or raise your hand by dialing *9. And I will remind our one caller of that from time to time in case he or she forgets. So very good. So moving to our first item, which is meeting minutes. Motion A, to approve the GTLNC September 6th, 2022 Governmental Affairs Committee meeting minutes. May I have a first?
Ren?
Ren, thank you. Second?
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was absent, so I shouldn't.
Oh, you're right.
I did read the minutes, of course, but I wasn't.
Okay. So we will rescind your first. Do we have a first from someone else?
Sean.
Sean, thank you. Second?
Catherine will second.
Thank you. The pressure is on, Catherine. Thank you. So let's open this for discussion. Meeting minutes of September 6th. Any comments?
I found these really hard to read. I mean, I know that you changed the format of the agenda from the one that's the template for all the committees, but it makes it kind of hard to read. Like, we could just have the little table with the votes, like
Okay.
we do.
Maybe I can add that to the side. I mean, my goal, Catherine, was to just make the document as short as possible, but I can do a little grid. Any other comments? Let's see, members of the public, hearing none, seeing none. Shall we call this to a vote? I will read the motion once again, which is, sorry, I've got so many documents open. Motion A, to approve the GTLNC September 6th, 2022 Governmental Affairs Committee meeting minutes. How do you vote, Sean? Sean?
Yay. Sorry.
Thank you. Catherine?
No.
Okay. I vote yes. And Ren, I guess you'll have to abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. So, and Kelly is not here. So the meeting minutes do not pass. What do we do?
Did you vote, Tess?
I voted yes.
And Sean voted yes.
Okay. Okay. So then it does pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, Tess. All right. So the meeting passes. I thought we had, doesn't have to be a majority. Okay.
It has to be a majority of
Of
people
those-
voting.
Those present.
Abstaining is considered not voting.
Okay. In that case, we're good. Thank you very much. The meeting minutes pass. All right. Next up, moving right along, public comment on non-agenda items within the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council's jurisdiction. Do we have any comments from the public? And for the phone-in member of the public, you can press *9. And all right. Seeing none, hearing none, we will move to the next item. So, committee member news and announcements on anything relevant not on the agenda. Any news and announcements from the committee? All right. I do have one item to put in that is as follows. I just got a notice of, oh, I did want to make a disclosure at the top of the meeting. Something has come to my attention. And if any member of the public objects to the committee taking action on any of these agenda items, all of which were posted properly in the following ways: at our physical community kiosk, the Discovery Store, the southeast corner of Foreman Avenue and Riverside Drive, at the GTLNC.org website, and via the GTLNC weekly newsletter, which was distributed on Friday, September 30th, but it was inadvertently not published at the LA City's early notification system. If any members of the public have an objection as to that, please speak now. All right. Hearing none, seeing none, we will proceed. Thank you. All right, so I do have an item, which is this Southern California notice of request to increase rates from the Southern California Gas Company for hydrogen blending demonstration project. Does anybody have knowledge or interest in that? It's a gas rate hike from Southern California Gas. All right, well, I'm going to look into this and see what the process for public comment is, because the brochure I received was not clear, but it seems like a very open-ended proposal to me, and I'm all about fiscal responsibility. So if I find anything worth bringing to the committee's attention, I'll put it on the next agenda, meeting agenda. All right. Any other comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, I will move now to, let's see, item number 5, legislation of possible interest to the committee. Is there anything anyone would like to bring forward at this time? Okay, moving on to the next item. Item number 6, discussion and possible vote. Motion B, draft letter request for action regarding Los Angeles City housing policy. The draft is available at gtlnc.org under committee meeting and announcements, which I will read as soon as I get a first.
Sean.
Sean, thank you. Do I have a second? No second. Ren? Catherine?
I can't support this, so I'm not sure. I will second it if we want to discuss it.
I don't want to second
You
it
vote
to
for
open
it?
discussion if my not seconding it will prevent it from being discussed. But Tess, I believe you technically are able to second motions.
Okay, then I
As
second
chair.
it. I think it's worth discussing. And I want to, put it on the table. So this was submitted by a stakeholder. So let me read this draft.
The
All
whole
right.
thing.
Well, isn't that what we're supposed to do, Catherine? I don't have to. It's a letter request for action regarding the City of Los Angeles housing policy. Would you like me to read it or not?
I mean, it's a 2-page letter, but if you want to read the whole thing.
Okay, well, I don't have to read it if everyone here has read it, but what I can do is screen share. So this is a letter, a draft letter, a request for action to Mayor Garcetti and the Los Angeles City Council members. Why don't I do a screen share so members of the public can have a look? Okay, is this it? I think this is it. Yeah. All right. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Let me adjust my screen. Okay, now that anyway, all right. Can members of the public see this? Just want to make sure. My screen is paused. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Resume share.
It's visible.
Okay, it's visible. Good. All right. So this was a letter submitted by a stakeholder about Los Angeles housing policy. And I'll just read some highlights that our community, Greater Toluca Lake and the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council communicates herein our dissatisfaction with current City of Los Angeles housing policies that destroy incentives that would provide for long-term, healthy, compliant residential and commercial real estate market. It goes on with 10 recommendations. Number 1, to end the state of emergency in the City of Los Angeles. Number 2, to return control of properties to those who hold title. This relates to landlord laws. Number 3, end unwarranted tenant protections that permit or normalize a tenant's non-payment of contractually obligated rent payments. I know we have a number of landlord stakeholders in the area. Number 4, end housing programs that encourage tenant dependencies on government to provide free housing, such as Project Room Key. And there are several other recommendations here as well. I'll just scroll down and put them here. So are there any comments from the committee?
If I have a number of problems with this, and if you just bear with me, I'll just go through real quickly, and then we can go back and talk about it if we want to. But I think the first paragraph is too broad. In fact, the whole thing, when you do something like this aimed at the mayor and city council through a neighborhood council, it really is it's the wrong vehicle.
And I'm not saying I disagree with you, Ren, but what would be the right vehicle?
Well, let me just go through all of my points here.
Okay.
The second paragraph starts out talking about 100,000 residential housing units sit empty and 45,000 unsheltered. The implication there is somehow the empty units need to be made available for the unsheltered, but I think that's just way too broad and problematic. Going through the points in the state emergency in the city of Los Angeles, I think there's several state emergencies that are going on. One is for COVID, another is around the unhoused. I think that needs to be specific. Number 2, return control of properties to those who hold title is way too vague and broad. Number 3, I don't have a problem with number 3. Number 4, end housing programs that encourage tenant dependencies on government. Again, the Project Room Key is one that's named here. I don't support the notion of ending that program. Number 5, there might be a number of reasons why the city of Los Angeles would acquire residential properties. And this is too vague. I mean, the city takes pieces of property all the time for parks, for other other governmental uses, to widen the streets, et cetera. So,
Okay.
This is way too broad. Number 6, the schools are not in the mayor's or city council's jurisdiction. So number 6 is, talks about LAUSD schools, and that's not in our purview. Okay, the whole number 7 is really an economics problem, which, I don't know that the mayor and city council is going to, they're trying to fix this. And I don't think this paragraph is useful.
Okay.
Okay, the land uses within the 3,000 feet of metro stops. People were suggesting here that they not allow any fast food restaurants or coffee shops. And this, begs the question of people's rights under the ownership of property. If you suddenly take away value of property, that could be kickbacks there and legal repercussions for the city. Number 9. My particular problem with number 9 is, eliminating the requirement for parking for residential is, I think is going in the wrong direction. We already have a number of places in Toluca Lake where the overflow from the multifamily parking goes into the residential communities. We've got a request for a parking district coming up to the neighborhood council through the Plum Committee this month. So to reduce or eliminate parking requirement, I think is not going to work. Okay, and asking the police department to enforce laws is, again, that's problematic. The police have to be, they have to pop up and deal with the most urgent problems, the most serious criminal activity. The classic is, there's a law against spitting on the street, but the police don't drive around looking for people spitting on the street. And so the problem the police have with the homeless is very obvious. They don't have the manpower to be out there constantly overseeing all the homeless encampments, and it's turned into a huge problem for the city. But asking them to enforce the laws is, that's a waste of time. Anyway, that was my one over on the.
Well, thanks for going over it thoroughly, Ren. Thank you for your comments. I will hold mine until we hear from Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
I mean, I appreciate a lot of what Ren said. I overall think that this is a pretty hostile and in a lot of places really infantilizing document. The idea that having assistance programs like Project Room Key incentivizes people to be dependent on the government feels like 1980s welfare queen talking points. That's not what they're designed for, and that's not necessarily going to be the outcome of trying to help people get into housing. And there are just so many places in this document where there is a very clear perspective that is not sympathetic to the people that are actually encountering any sort of homelessness or struggling to afford their existing homes. And it's a very this just feels like a pretty, I hate to say politicized document, because I do think that we as a neighborhood council have a place to voice the opinions of our neighborhood, but I don't think this is reflective of what our neighborhood actually believes in. I mean, from small points like Ren rightfully pointing out that our neighborhood has consistently been opposed to reducing parking requirements in new housing, to the idea that, you know, requiring certain things like having a balcony is somehow a ridiculous luxury, as opposed to just a useful thing to have for having a living space that feels comfortable. I am incredibly uncomfortable with what this document suggests our neighborhood council would believe in, and I am firmly opposed to it.
All right. Well, thank you for your comments. I'm sure maybe we'll hear from the stakeholder. But Sean, do you have any comments?
Sorry. Well, the question that I have at this point, what was the intention? Is this something they wanted a letter of action for?
It's a request for a letter of action.
Okay. Well, there's certain things that I do like about this, certain things I don't like about this. I think that it's kind of not, it's hitting a lot of points. I think that if we were a little more focused, and we're asked this, I mean, this letter does have a big ask. And I think that if we were maybe to, you know, like there's a lot of things that are very broad, and there's a lot of things that are very specific. Like a dishwasher, I don't know that I qualify dishwasher as a luxury. It's a good use of time, actually. So I don't know. I think that if anything were to come forward with this, I think that we need to kind of take a look at this and maybe reevaluate each one, maybe hone it down a little bit if there's something specific. And maybe, I mean, it's a lot of ask. So I think maybe we should focus on stuff that is maybe a little bit more germane to the task at hand, or, you know, maybe we just find out, do we have an opportunity to talk to stakeholder, maybe get an idea of where they're coming from?
All right. Well, I'll give a few comments, and then we can open it up to members of the public and stakeholders. I'm checking to see raised hands. I've raised my own hand. So I think it's a good idea to put these topics on the table, because clearly there's a lot of dissension, even on our committee and in our neighborhood council, about how these housing issues work. And it's important to discuss them. This, I think, is as good a place to start as any. I was asked to agendize this, and so I did. So, you know, it's one thing to come up with an idea, and then another thing to figure out how to make it happen. And while I don't agree with everything in this letter, I do agree generally that we really need to be discussing these things and how these issues affect our community, what this is costing, and how these elements play together. So I thought your note was interesting, Ren, the 100,000 residential housing units sitting empty, and your interpretation that it implies 45,000 unsheltered persons should, you know, perhaps be, you know, housed there. I didn't interpret it that way, but that would be something to be clarified. We definitely have a number of people who are shelter resistant, or services resistant. This is a big problem, especially in our neighborhood. I don't know what the answer is, because once the city council's obligations have been met under the various lawsuits and the settlements, and the housing has been provided and is available, as our city council member Paul Krikorian stated in July of this year, then what further obligations do we have as a community when that housing is available and it's offered to them and they refuse it? This is a big problem. And we're seeing it in a very large way in this neighborhood. People who have been just chronically resisting any sort of, almost any kind of help, and certainly they've been refusing housing. So as far as ending the state of emergency in the city of Los Angeles, I understand, and you're correct, Ren, that there are several states of emergency. So I'd like to understand exactly what those are, because it's still not clear when what those states of emergency are precisely and when they will end. So as far as tenant protections, I am very much in favor of a number of tenant protections, but I also know from various friends of mine who are landlords who have been unable to collect rent, even when it could have and would have been paid by a state or federal agency. A recalcitrant tenant didn't do the paperwork, even though it would have cost the tenant nothing. And the landlord would have been reimbursed by way of these programs. So I think that's pretty shocking and unfair. This has to be a two-way street. So I want people to be able to live comfortably together. I don't want to see a state of emergency endure indefinitely without some understanding or definition of when it will end. And I appreciate your comments, Ren, and certainly yours as well. Catherine, we don't agree on all of these things. And I do, however, agree that much of this language is overly broad, but as the stakeholder stated, to at least put these issues on the table and discuss them, I think is important, which is why I agendized it. So I will go now to questions from the public. If there are any questions or comments, we have now 7 members of the public here. All right, so we have a question from, I can't tell who that is. Oh, here we are, Jonathan Gregory. All right, so Jonathan, whoops, sorry, Jonathan, I accidentally muted you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
I'm losing my voice, so I'm jet lagged. What I'm mostly interested in understanding is what members of the neighborhood council envision for the future of Los Angeles for housing. My understanding right now, if we believe what we read, is that it costs almost $800,000 to build a affordable unit, something like a studio or something. So we're talking $800,000 per unit of affordable housing. Something's wrong. It feels like a scam to me. I don't understand what the city of Los Angeles has planned for its future, since people are living in the streets, and that's not, in my world, a tolerable, normal way for a city or a country to manage its affairs. So I'm interested to hear not what you don't like, but I'm interested to understand what you foresee as a way forward. To me, if I were living in a tent, I know poverty and I know you can survive it, but you have to be incented and have an incentive to get out of it. It shouldn't be a pleasant experience in the nature of a country. In other words, no country has a way forward if people love living in poverty, or if it's an acceptable condition. So people want to get out of poverty. So my question for the board members is not so much what you don't like about the letter, but what do you have to say about housing, since it's costing $800,000 right now to build a unit? If you want to have parking for people who currently can't even manage a tent, it just seems confused to me that you have to give something up. You have to agree that density someplace has to exist, that an affordable unit can't look like a luxury building. There has to be some way forward, and people have to be able to put it into words. So that's my question to board members is, what do you see as a way forward to house people? If you think people living in tents need cars, it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm interested to understand all this. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any, thank you, Jonathan. Do we have comments from any other members of the public? All right, looks like Eleanor Wallen. Go ahead, Eleanor. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I did. So I'm sorry that I entered late to this discussion, but I printed out a few of the bills that were passed by Governor Newsom on September 30th. He passed, just for if people keep up on this, 997 bills out of 1,166 bills to consider. Everything from healthcare, labor, law enforcement, criminal justice, climate, housing, and homeless.
Eleanor, may I
Yes.
just interrupt you briefly?
So
So just hold on a second.
sure.
I don't know if this is a general way to get into this particular agenda item. Did you want to comment
So
on this?
nothing about the housing and homeless.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome to bring up housing and homeless. We just have to try to stick to the agenda.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, so I was just trying to give you a brief overlook. So
Okay, good.
38 measures were signed that are related to housing.
Okay.
AB 2011 and SB 6. And this is just a brief description aimed to boost housing production and affordability by turning unused retail spaces
Mhm,
into homes and communities.
mhm.
The other is the SB 1338 establishes new judicial branches in all of California's 58 counties that will provide court-ordered care to those who are unhoused and severely mentally ill. I briefly read that one, and it requires somebody to be an advocate or supporter. I just wanted to bring those two issues up and wondered if the board ever reviews how those bills are going to trickle down and affect our communities.
Well, I will, why don't we take another comment from another member of the public, Matthew Middleton, and then I will address that, Eleanor. And we certainly welcome discussion of all of these items. I think ideally to affect legislation, we try to get to it before it's passed, but certainly that's a fair question to ask. How will the passage of these bills affect us? It's hugely important. So let me go to Matthew Middleton. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak, first of all. I wanted to talk a bit about item 9. I 100% agree with the idea that a lot of the things suggested in here about square footage, parking, dishwashers, and balconies, those are really nice to have. And I don't want to in any way say that, all of them should go away or anything like that, but there is unfortunately a truth to the idea that then the more nice things you have, even if they are very small, nice things like a balcony, so, you don't necessarily consider it very, very huge, but when you have it, it's great. It's like really a great thing and a wonderful thing to have. But to drive down pricing and make sure things are even more affordable, because I personally don't fully understand what is happening with the affordability of everything, but I know that when there are standards to be held, that kind of raises the minimums of, if every place has to have a dishwasher, I think that's really great. But if it increases the pricing, and if every item ends up increasing the pricing to the point that the average person is having a lot of difficulty getting housing and finding a way to kind of having like a stable space in their life so that they can do their work and live their lives, we may wish to look into altering those 4 standards as far as minimums go. But it is important to note that having those things is still always great. So I just wanted to bring that up, as I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think examining some of the items may be important. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Matthew. So it looks like, do we have another member of the public? Okay, so you took your hand down. So thank you, Matthew and Jonathan and Eleanor. And it looks like we have a comment from Jamie York. Go ahead, Jamie.
I don't want to be too long, but I just want to say I keep hearing people talk about dishwashers. Dishwashers save water, and we're in a drought, so I actually think dishwashers are a very good thing, even if they do. I don't think it's dishwashers that's driving the raising of the overall pricing, because like those are not super expensive compared to the overall price, but dishwashers save hundreds of gallons of water a week compared to hand washing. So dishwashers are good just from like an environmental conservancy standpoint. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I guess I'll comment or respond that I don't know that, the requirement or removal of dishwashers or balconies or other so-called luxuries is necessarily the point. It was just as an example, at least that's my interpretation of this letter. But I do think that Jonathan asks a very good question, which is, how do we see the future of housing in Los Angeles? And we have another item on the agenda a little bit later this evening, which will get straight to that, in fact. So I think we would agree, however, that this letter could use some work. So if the stakeholder is interested in redrafting, we can perhaps resubmit it for review. I do agree that this should be discussed, and however we may differ on opinions, that's the whole point of having these committee and neighborhood council meetings in the first place. So I wouldn't be comfortable passing the letter as it's written now. I would want it to, go through some pretty serious drafts and address a lot of what Ren brought up, and certainly some of what Catherine brought up as well. So with that, shall we table the discussion for another meeting?
I second tabling.
Okay. Sean? Is this technically a vote? We're voting to table. So I vote that we table. Catherine, table. Ren?
Yeah, let's table it, although I think housing policy in general, especially legislative things in Sacramento and so forth, and we just got through with the legislative session, and we've had a lot of discussion about the bills going through. But obviously we need to stay tuned in on that. Yeah, let's table it and have a time when we can talk about broad policy issues.
All right, very good. And Sean?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's all right. Okay, so we're at least in unison on that. So moving, and thank you to members of the public for your comments. Moving right along to item number 7. I would suggest that we go to, that we skip ahead, because this update of the standing rules, while it's important, I think, and certainly members of the public are welcome to comment and weigh in, is going to be less interest perhaps than number 8 and number 9. I would like to skip to item number 9, motion E, which is as follows. The Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council supports changes to the Los Angeles Municipal Lobbying Ordinance, or MLO, regarding neighborhood councils to benefit transparency in the city. There's a full draft of this proposed community impact statement language at gtlnc.org, but I can also draw it up and do a screen share. So may I have a first?
Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Second.
Ren.
Thank you, Ren. Okay, Ren and Catherine, first and second. So let me pull this up. All right, so this municipal lobbying ordinance adds some clarity to the Council File 220560. This draft impact statement relates to that council file number and Los Angeles Municipal Code sections 48.01. So I'll just read a summary. The Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council supports changes to the Los Angeles Municipal Lobbying Ordinance regarding neighborhood councils to benefit transparency in the city. We urge Committee Chair Nuri Martinez to schedule this council file for consideration and a vote in the Rules, Elections, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee. According to section 48.08.8, lobbying disclosure. Oh, by the way, am I screen sharing? I'm sorry. I should be screen sharing. There it is. According to section 48.08.8 of the lobbying disclosure of written communications to neighborhood councils of the Los Angeles Municipal Code, current lobbying ordinance, a lobbyist disclosure is only required for written communications to neighborhood councils. This ordinance would be updated to include the same disclosure when a lobbyist makes an oral presentation or public comment to a neighborhood council related to his or her lobbying efforts. We agree with section 48.11 of the draft municipal lobbying ordinance under consideration, and there's a page indicated number 33. So this relates to transparency, that every voting member of a neighborhood council has the right to know if a lobbyist speaks on an item for which they are compensated to lobby. There's a diffusion of responsibility and a lack of training we see. And I've learned about this through attending a lot of other meetings and talking to other board members of other neighborhood councils. A lobbyist may send a correct written disclosure via email, but often these communications do not go to every board member in a timely manner, if at all. So unless the recipient board member diligently forwards these communications, it is possible that no other board members would know of lobbyist status of the individual speaking. And the lack of training is also cited, that neighborhood councils do not receive training on how to identify or look up lobbyist activities in the city. And for myself, I know I had to find that out on my own. Therefore, the legal onus and responsibility should be on the lobbyist to disclose his status as a paid lobbyist rather than on the volunteer board member to discover it. So I am, I put forward this motion, and I have to give full credit to Jamie York, who drafted the original, who put together the original draft. She's from another neighborhood council, and we have talked about this, and we're both very much in agreement. I took a truncated version of hers and put it forward here. So opening it for discussion. Any thoughts from the committee?
I think it's good. I would recommend that for the links in the document, also include a written out URL so that if someone downloads it and it doesn't contain the link anymore.
Sorry,
still-
the links should contain what, Catherine?
The actual URL.
Okay.
So like just put it after.
I understand. I
in
didn't hear the
parentheses.
word URL got blurred. Okay, good point. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, just quickly, I support this. I think this is
Okay.
a good idea. So we know who's formally being paid to lobbyists.
Yeah, there have been problems in neighborhood councils, so this will help to eliminate that. Sean, any comments?
I have one more thing, which
Of
is
course.
to make sure that we neutralize any of the genders. There's one thing in the last paragraph that says this announcement could be made by the lobbyist prior to his comments. I think it should say prior to their comments. Rather than saying his or her, just make everything there. It's easy, it covers everyone, including people who are non-binary.
So I'm really old school. I like the old school his, but anyway, we can do that. I will capitulate on that. So anything else, Catherine?
That's it.
Sean?
I was going to say that it's funny. I was just reading about something that I think it was maybe in Tarzana, but this was an issue. So yes, I'm actually, I like this idea as well.
So
I
it's
definitely think,
like
yes.
a rousing approval. Good. I'm going to stop the share and go to comments from the public. And here we have Miss Jamie York. All right, Jamie, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for agendizing this. So far, 36 neighborhood councils have voted to take a position of support or support if amended. I really like that you guys are asking for the amendment to also make it for city council and committee. I think that that's really important because I think members of the public have just as much right to know.
Jamie, could you repeat what you said?
I like that you guys are including the request to also have it be for city council and committee for the lobbyist disclosure, because I think that the members of the public deserve that. But the reason that this is really important, because in addition to the loophole that it closes for neighborhood councils, it closes a number of other loopholes that lobbyists have been exploiting to avoid registration. And so basically, this hasn't been comprehensively updated since 1994. Every time the Ethics Commission has brought forward new recommendations, it's died in committee. And so I am hoping that if enough neighborhood councils show their support for this, then it won't die in committee this time, because we desperately need these changes that will bring more transparency, that will bring more clarity, and that will really serve the public better. And that's what this so much is about. I don't know if you want me to talk about the nonprofit exemption or not, but that's the one other thing that I'd urge adding is to lower it.
Let me just throw in there that this was part of the original draft ordinance that Jamie put together, and I left it off here because I think it is important, but I believe it's important enough to have its own community impact statement. But since it's related, if you want to go ahead and share your thoughts with the committee, that would be fine, and we can bring that forward maybe at our next meeting.
So right now, the Ethics Commission is recommending a $2 million sort of cutoff for whether or not a nonprofit would have to register their lobbying activities. But I think that that's way too high because only 16% of nonprofits in California have revenues of $1 million or more. But the San Francisco Ethics Commission currently matches their standards to the IRS. So basically, if you file a 990N or a 990 Easy, you wouldn't have to worry about the registering as a lobbyist. But if you're above those levels, so it's 250,000 in revenue or 500,000 in assets, that's basically above that's when it would trigger, and it would capture a lot more. And the fear is that if we don't lower that exemption, what we're going to see is lobbying organizations forming sort of fake nonprofits to get around.
Yeah, I think that's an important concern these days. So in essence, to lower the amount required to trigger that exemption, right, Jamie?
Correct, because right now we have things like lobbyists will not be paid until after something's completed, so that, oh, I haven't been compensated, therefore I don't have to register because I haven't been compensated yet. We have lobbyists who really exploit the 30-hour recommendation, and they're like, oh, well, I only did 29 hours in this quarter, but there's no real way to prove that. Fortunately, this also has to close that loophole too, but I don't want to leave the nonprofit bit on the table as a future potential loophole because we already know that they have been exploiting it. And there's a lot of neighborhood councils that have experienced this issue where lobbyists come in and they kind of pretend to be like a community member or like a member of like a church group or like a volunteer organization. And
I've seen that too. So I think that's time for you, Jamie. I went over a little bit with you. So, I think this is very important. And the nonprofit thing, I want to agendize for our next meeting. So I think we're all in agreement in principle and mostly on the language of this particular CIS. And if I add first, do we vote to amend as suggested by Catherine, including URLs and making the pronouns gender neutral? Do I have a?
Yes.
So I basically am
Amendment.
the first, and then if someone wants to second.
Okay, so Catherine first, Ren seconds. All right, let's vote on, and first we vote to amend, and then we actually vote on the language of the amendment. So voting to amend, I'm a yes.
No, we vote on the language of the amendment, and then we vote on whether or not we support the CIS overall. We don't
Okay,
need to
I thought
vote
in
to
order
amend and then vote on the
Okay.
amendment link.
All right, so we vote to update this community impact statement as follows: to add the specific URLs to the hot links, number one, and number two, to change the male, female pronouns to gender neutral pronouns. How do you vote, Catherine?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ren,
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Okay, so we vote to amend, and now let us vote on the CIS itself. Catherine, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ren?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean.
Yes.
Unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right. So, and thank you for bringing that forward, Jamie. It's really good, important, and necessary. And I will get with you on the nonprofit language as well. So moving to the, let's see, as long as there are members of the public here, I'm going to go to the items that may be of interest to the public. So I'm going to move now to number 8, which is continued from September 6th, discussion and possible vote. Motion D, the Board of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council opposes Council File 22-1100-S5, a ballot measure on the November 8th, 2022 ballot, which has no dollar amount listed for the cost of developing, constructing, or acquiring up to 5,000 additional units of low-income rental housing units in each of the 15 Los Angeles City Council districts. This motion will be submitted as a community impact statement to Council File 22-1100-S5. Opening this for discussion. Do I have a first?
I'll first.
Thank you, Ren. Second.
Sean.
Sean, don't die. Okay, so there was a question when this was brought forward last month as to whether or not neighborhood councils can take a position on something that is on the ballot. And I've researched it, and in fact, the answer is yes. So a neighborhood council can weigh in on ballot initiatives. They may take a position on a ballot measure, city or state ballot measure, before it is placed on a ballot and communicate their positions to the city council. And they may take positions on a ballot measure, city or state, after it is placed on a ballot, provided the position is taken at a regular meeting. Opposing and supporting views are treated equally, and it is made clear that the neighborhood council is only directing its position to the city council. All right, so that is on the empowerla.org website. And so that should satisfy that. And let's see, if we're directing this to city council, that's the nub of it. So bringing this matter forward again, I'm not opposed to housing or even to building housing. I'm opposed to the blank check nature of this. Other neighborhood councils have weighed in and oppose it as well. I looked deeper into this, and not only would these additional units be exempt from CEQA, according to an analysis from the city attorney, which may or may not be a good thing. I tend to like CEQA because it's the California Environmental Quality Act is important, I think, to the environment. We don't want things to be so overly dense or unfriendly to the environment that they pass without that sort of rigorous standard. So I have a pretty big problem with that. But I will, I made most of my arguments at the last meeting. I can make them again here, but I want to open this to discussion to members of the committee. Any thoughts?
I'll chime in. I think we need to be very careful not to just automatically have all of the things on the ballot end up on our agenda. We wouldn't possibly have enough time to talk about all these things. This particular one, I am opposed to because the numbers are so outside the realm of financial reality. The timelines are too long, et cetera. I mean, I think it's not a solution to the problem. I think it's just a waste of time, and I'm not sure why it ended up on the ballot, but I'm opposed to it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Ren. But I don't know that there's going to be a rush of items, ballot items put on the agendas, but you know, we would have worse problems. So it's
Well, I'm thinking about going forward. I mean, obviously the ballot
okay.
there and so forth, but going forward into the future, I think we need to be careful not to be looking to the city ballot or you know, the larger scale ballot items for, you know, a lot of discussion and policy at our level, unless it affects us directly.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree with you, but this thing, you know, I think this something rises to the level of concern for enough to be on the agenda and to be discussed. So Sean and Catherine, any comments?
You know, to go to Ren's point earlier about like $800,000 per unit, I think a blank check with no numbers doesn't make sense, because that just gives them the freedom, you know, for lack of a better term, to go all willy-nilly. You know, I think that there should be, you know, nothing, you know, no money, no dollar amount. No.
Yeah, I think this needs to be, we need to see a budget. We need to see something, some restriction, some plan for the spending, not, this is the most generally vaguely worded item I've ever seen. So Catherine, any thoughts?
Excuse me.
I still personally feel uncomfortable taking a position on neighborhood council in relation to something that's actually on the ballot. So I'm going to abstain from this.
Okay. Well,
I realize you've looked it up and said that it's okay, but I don't feel comfortable with it, so I'm not going to participate.
all right, that's fine. Would you like the URL of the Empower LA lobbying?
Nope, I know how to Google.
Okay, very good. So
One last comment.
yes.
It was Jonathan who talked about 800,000. The number I throw around is 500,000, but in either case, it's, you know, it's an awful lot of money to per housing unit. And if we were going to try and house 50, 60,000 people at $500,000 or more per, you know, we never find the money to do it. So
No, and I will
answers.
add to that, Ren, that when the tiny homes became a thing, I mean, I thought aspects of it were interesting and possibly even good or practical. But when I looked at the costs associated with the tiny homes, the soft costs ran into the neighborhood of 60%. All right. And I'm talking, you know, consultants, not, you know, not labor and not materials. Of course, this was, I think, pre-COVID too. And I don't know how much of that has changed. I'm sure it's changed dramatically, but that's another thing to look at. So if the city is really sincere about helping the city, then the city needs to eat some of its soft costs or give us, you know, something more than a better value than that. So let me open this now to members of the public. If anyone wishes to comment, now is your chance. And for the member of the public using the phone, you can dial *9 if you'd like to raise your hand and make a public comment. Okay. Jonathan Gregory, go ahead.
Thanks. I would simply say that I like that you put this on the agenda, Tess, because it's about housing. Housing is such a big deal because it's got its consequences to Greater Toluca, like its lack of housing. The whole situation that's going on has everything to do with housing. I watched this subject play out at City Council, and it was the constant flavor of no accountability. I've never seen a government function like LA City Council does, with this preoccupation with no accountability, not for themselves, and they pass ordinances that excuse others from accountability. So I'm glad you put it on, just because this is it showcases the whole essence of what it means to not be accountable, not accountable to taxpayers, not accountable to people who keep numbers, not accountable to having housing. I mean, just to throw some stupid thing like this on a ballot that's confusing and makes no sense is just a step forward on unaccountability. And I think it's such a great place for a neighborhood council to be saying, this doesn't pass. Even the slightest idea of governance. This is a complete lack of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments from members of the public? Eleanor, Matthew, Cortez, Jill. All right. Seeing none here we have Jill Young. Go ahead, Jill. Your mic is unmuted.
I appreciate you putting this on. This is my first awareness of this. And I do think something like that on the ballot, it's a kind of feel-good measure. If there's nothing defined, I believe people can just say, okay, we have homelessness handled. They're building 5,000 units. And that simply isn't true. Seems like there could be so many ways you could work it, like a WPA type of program involving able-bodied homeless people to be involved in the process of building the homes, more like a Habitat for Humanity or like a public works sort of thing. So I appreciate that it's there, and I appreciate becoming aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Any other comments from members of the public? All right, I'm gonna lower your hand, Jill. Thank you for that. Okay. So shall we take it to a vote? All right, let me read the motion once again. All right, this is motion D, continued from September 6, 2022. The Board of the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council opposes Council File 22-1100-S5, a ballot measure on the November 8th, 2022 ballot, which has no dollar amount listed for the cost of developing, constructing, or acquiring up to 5,000 additional units of low-income rental housing units in each of the 15 Los Angeles City Council districts. This motion will be submitted as a community impact statement, a CIS, to Council File 22-1100-S5. Ren, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Sean, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, so you vote yes to oppose, and I vote yes. Catherine?
Abstain.
All right, and the motion carries. Motion D. Thank you very much. So let us go now to item number 7. This is a correction to the standing rule. Motion C, the Greater Toluca Lake corrects its standing rule by adding the words, quote, by the president, end quote, to the existing standing rule, which pertains to who may place items on the agendas as follows, quote, items shall be placed on the general board agenda by the president or by committee chairs submitting items generated by their respective committees or by written request of 2 board members, end quote. Do I have a first?
Ren?
Ren, thank you.
Sean.
Sean, thank you. So opening this for discussion, this is merely a correction. There was never any intention to take away the ability to agendize anything from the president, and that's all this is. Any questions or comments?
I think there was a pretty clear intention to take away the president's ability to unilaterally agendize something. That was a large discussion point that we had.
That's not how I remember it, Catherine, although you may be right. I don't.
There are minutes probably that reflect that.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Ren?
This also needs to be clarified that this is for the standing rule on agenda setting. That's just a minor.
I'm sorry, this needs to be, okay, that
It's
is
not our standing rule. It's the standing rule agenda setting that is being amended. We have
Okay.
multiple standing rules.
okay, the agenda setting standing rule. Ren,
And I
thoughts?
disagree with the word corrected. This
Okay.
is a change.
Okay, I could certainly go along with corrected. I vaguely remember the conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me at the time when we first were going through all this, there was talk about any board member would have the authority to put something on the agenda.
Mhm.
At that point, then the president, being a board member, could put things on the agenda. I think when it became two people, then in effect, the president no longer could unilaterally put things on the board. And I think, I can see the problem with this in some senses. We don't want things to suddenly pop up on the agenda and sort of sneak through without whatever. But I think, on the other hand, there are times when something comes out from the city or something is going on where the president needs to get it on the agenda quickly. And so I think, having the president have that authority may be, useful in the future. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to vote for this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to vote for this too, because that's not how I remember it, Catherine. But even if that were the case, and I went through my notes, and you may be right, I don't think. Let me look at the language again.
I don't actually have a problem with this. It was just a very big talking point initially. Part of the reason that we felt comfortable giving the president back their ability to vote on things was because they were not also able to set the agenda.
Well,
so
I mean,
I don't have a problem with this because it does allow other people to set agenda items, not just the president.
Yes. That to me was the biggest issue of all, to allow other people to set the agenda or to agendize items. So, Sean, any thoughts or comments?
I'm of the same vein. I like the idea that we have an opportunity for other specifically like committee members or the committee chairs have the ability to specifically for the general board. I have no problem with this.
Now, and apropos of the president doing it unilaterally, do we have an issue with that? Should this be amended to say the president plus one, or just as it is here?
Well, there's already the president plus one. That would be two board members.
Okay. Submitting items okay, or by written request shall be placed. Well, I don't know that it's precisely clear, Catherine. Items
really? He's a board member. And so if any two board members submit, the president is a board member.
Yeah, I'm saying that. I understand that, but this does this give him the power or the authority to
yes,
to put something on the agenda alone?
Yes, this change would.
Let me make sure I understand this. Now, normally the executive committee develops the agenda at their meeting before the general board meeting and before the agenda goes out to the public. Mm-hmm. Would this still be limited to, I mean, it would still need to go onto the agenda after the executive committee has put their agenda together, but before it's formally published within the time frame. Am I seeing that correctly?
I don't know, honestly. So I'd like to bring in Jonathan Gregory, who is the one who asked this to be agendized. Jonathan, can you speak up, Jonathan?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. So Jonathan, go ahead.
Okay. If you recall the way things were before a year and a half ago, only the president had the ability to put something on the agenda. That's the way it used to be. When it came to the time for vote, I remember that it was Matt who spoke up and didn't want to do some of the amendments, saying that he wanted to preserve the power of the president to have that ability. So what I recall was, as Tess does, is that the board itself, I mean, I personally don't have any, we're all saying we don't have a problem with this. The whole idea is to simply enable the president, who should have the ability to put something on the agenda, just like he always did, especially in the case of an emergency or whatever. The president should have that ability. The whole idea of what we did was to broaden who could put things on the agenda. I never proposed making it a narrower scope. I simply proposed, when I got involved, to broaden it so that it was more likely that the stakeholders' voices could find their way onto the agenda. And that became adding in the end, 2 board members co-sponsoring a agenda item that would end up on an agenda. So I think that this is only a fix to re-empower the president independently to put something on the agenda. As far as the executive committee goes, remember there was that fancy language from Dunn that the executive committee is not really writing the agenda. They say set the agenda, but it's really, the agenda is supposed to be set by either 2 board members, or in this case, if we add it, the president, or a committee sending it to the agenda. So I think it is a very good idea to have the agenda, the president able to do it, because it also encourages camaraderie. That's the first thing I experienced, is rather than get 2 board members to co-sponsor something against the wishes of the president, it's a better idea to be able to approach the president and have him put it on the agenda if he'd like it. That way, it makes it feel like the board is working together rather than forcing things on each other's throat. So I just believe it's a very good correction. And if you don't want to use the word correction, use whatever word you want to use. I don't really think it matters. Thanks.
All right. Well, what Jonathan said. Okay, so do we have any suggestions for changing this language to amend it to make it more clear? Anyone? All
I mean,
right.
I feel strongly that you need to clarify that this is for the agenda setting standing rule,
Okay.
and specifically for the general board agenda,
All right.
because
good.
there's multiple different agendas
All right. General.
within that standing rule.
All right.
And the
Does that make-
presidents that put
does that
anything
make-
on a,
Does that make sense to everybody? It makes sense to me. Thank you, Catherine. All right, Sean, any grand objections? All right.
No.
Okay, so then the language as it stands in the quotation marks is fine. And this will, when it's agendized for vote for the general board in a couple of weeks, I will make sure that it identifies the agenda setting standing rule for the general board meetings. So let's take this to a vote. Motion C, the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council, shall we say, updates its standing rule? Correct. Okay, well, corrects, updates. Okay. The Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council corrects its standing rule by adding the words by the president or, in quotation marks, to the existing agenda setting standing rule for general board meetings as follows. Quote, items shall be placed on the general board agenda by the president or by committee chairs submitting items generated by the respective committees or by written request of 2 board members, end quote. Ren, how do you vote? You're muted.
Yes.
Catherine, how do you vote?
yes,
Sean?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Excellent. Motion carries. We are done with that. Thank you. So next on the agenda, item number 10, new business future projects. If Eleanor is still there, no, I was going to ask her if she had any specific legislation. Ren, anything you want to put on the agenda to storm the barricades? No? All right, not this month. Next, Sean, Catherine, any new business suggestions?
Not for me at this time.
All right, old business. At the moment, there's none. And I will now, whoops. Sorry, I accidentally clicked something. I will call this meeting adjourned and close it at 7:47 p.m., but not before letting you know that our next Government Affairs Committee meeting will be on Tuesday, November 8th at 6:30 p.m. And I thank you all very much for attending. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Night all.